Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, one of the big events that's supposed to be taking place this year, in addition to the World Cup here in Mexico, is the negotiation, the review. I don't know how to call it, of the USMCA. And President Donald Trump has been making somewhat confusing statements in regards to the future of the USMCA. Those of you who follow U.S. news know that President Donald Trump stated that he thought the USMCA was irrelevant, that the United States did not need an agreement with Mexico and Canada because basically the United States does not need cars or products from Canada or Mexico. So of course, when you hear something like that, you have to ask the question, is this the end of the USMCA? That's why I really appreciate today's guests. Kenneth Smith, he was one of the negotiators of the original USMCA team. And Kenneth, throughout the years, I've always appreciated you joining us on this show to try to explain not only these trade agreements, but more importantly, what does this look like? I mean, President Trump says the USMCA is irrelevant. Is the USMCA irrelevant for the United States economy? Welcome,
Thank you
Kenneth.
very much for inviting me to your show, Ana Maria. It is definitely a very relevant trade agreement for all three countries. It's a trade agreement that's worth $2 trillion for the three countries. Just bilaterally, Mexico and the US are going to reach close to $900 billion in trade this year. And some of the leading think tanks in the United States have stated that almost 15 million jobs in the United States depend on trade with Mexico and Canada. Mexico is the number one destination for the top agricultural exports of the United States. It's a key market for all of the corn belt of the US. It is also a very important market for industrial goods, but also Mexico provides over $100 billion of auto parts and components every year to the United States that are essential for manufacturing of vehicles in the United States. So when President Trump talks about boosting manufacturing in the US, competing successfully with China, it is just a simple economic fact that the US needs the Mexican economy and also the Canadian economy. So that is part of what Mexico, in its bilateral discussions that it's been having for the last year with the US, has been trying to convince the White House of, which is essentially we are not part of the problem, we're part of the solution. We should eliminate tariffs amongst ourselves in North America in order to be stronger together and to be able to compete with China in the future. And a key element of that is maintaining and extending the USMCA.
What's been so interesting, Kenneth, is Canada and Mexico have taken two very different strategies in terms of dealing with Donald Trump. On the one hand, Canada, Mark Carney this week would travel to China, met with Xi Jinping. He's reaching trade agreements with China, despite the fact that Donald Trump, I'm sure, is going to be quite, I don't know, I don't know if the word is angered, but clearly Canada is sending a sign to Donald Trump. At the same time, Donald Trump has set a series of, I guess, tariffs on Canadian products. And of course, at one point, Donald Trump kept on insisting that Canada become the 51st state of the United States. On the other hand, we have the government of Mexico. President Claudia Sheinbaum basically tries not to negotiate publicly on these comments made by President Donald Trump. She was very positive in terms of the USMCA, despite these statements made by President Donald Trump this week. And she's dealing with different types of pressures from President Donald Trump that has to do more with the trafficking of fentanyl and with these, what Donald Trump calls narco-terrorist organizations. So I'm trying to envision what 2026 is going to look like. I mean, in this environment, where Donald Trump uses tariffs as a way to pressure politically countries to fall into place and basically answer his demands. How is Mexico, Canada and the United States going to be able to negotiate a new or review the USMCA?
Yeah, we're definitely dealing with a very complex environment because there's many things happening at once. As you mentioned, the discussion going on around the USMCA in North America is not simply limited to trade issues as it used to be in the past. President Trump has inserted forcefully, since he came into his second mandate, the issues of security, as you mentioned, and also immigration as part of the mix. And I think the Mexican government has been correct in favoring negotiation over confrontation, so trying to cooperate with the U.S. on immigration, on security. The U.S. administration has congratulated the Mexican government on the seizures of drugs, extradition of criminals. And the efforts that it's made to strengthen the attacks, or rather the combating of organized crime. On the other hand, as you mentioned, Canada has been, as Mexico has been stating, Canada has a priority as part of its economic priorities to have a successful review of the agreement in 2026, but it is aware of the animosity that Trump has shown towards that country over the last year. And I think the efforts by Prime Minister Carney to travel to other countries, and this time around to China, is an effort to send a signal, as you say, to the US that it can diversify, that it can strengthen its relationships with other countries. I think it's a risky bet from the point of view that we don't know what reaction President Trump is going to have. You know, they're announcing that China and Canada are lowering tariffs on each other, and this includes automotive vehicles, for example, especially electric vehicles. And the US has been adamant over the last year that it needs to have its top allies align their economic security objectives, which in the US it's code word for containing China, right? So we still don't have an official response for the US government vis-a-vis the trip that Prime Minister Carney made to China. But if I had to bet on it, I am sure it's not going to be a positive one vis-a-vis the President Trump.
I mean, but part of the problem is USMCA is 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 supposed to be the agreement that rules the commercial relationship between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And of course, the United States has been imposing, threatening with tariffs. I guess the question is, what guarantee is there, even if there was if they reach the U.S. Even if there was an agreement, that the United States would continue to use the tariffs as a way of pressuring Mexico on other areas that do not necessarily have to do with commerce?
Yes, having these three blocks of tariffs on top of us here in Mexico, the IEEPA tariffs, the
Right.
automotive goods tariffs, and steel and aluminum is definitely a problem when you are starting a process of review of a free trade agreement. And the fact that Mexico had been trying, as well as Canada, to get rid of these tariffs before the end of last year to sort of clear the deck and then have a more constructive discussion on the USMCA review. Well, right now, both processes are overlapping, right? It doesn't seem that the US has an interest in taking away these tariffs, that they're going to use them or try to use them as leverage in the USMCA review. And I think Mexico and Canada are aware of the complications that this entails. That's why I think part of the strategy by the Mexican government is likely to be to try to convince the US of the need that during the USMCA review, there should be a truce, so to speak, sort of a disarmament, at least temporarily, of these tariffs, either lowering them substantially or taking them away completely, while the US, Mexico, and Canada are coming to an agreement on the extension of the USMCA. And let's remember that the USMCA right now is in place until 2036. So technically, the USMCA continues. It's not as if the countries don't agree in 2026 on the review, the agreement ends. But if you don't agree in 2026, you have to repeat the review exercise in 2027, then potentially in 2028. So that inserts more uncertainty into the process for investors, for exporters in the region. So the ideal scenario is to get rid of these tariffs or lower them substantially, and to be able to come to an agreement by the end of 2026. Right now, it's too early to tell what will be the outcome, especially because we don't know exactly what the US or Mexico or Canada are going to put on the table as far as specific demands on the USMCA. We don't know if the US will ask for minor changes to the agreement
Right.
or if they will ask for a full renegotiation. So right now, we're still struggling to figure out exactly what it is that the US wants to accomplish.
Kenneth, I hope we have the opportunity to continue conversing, trying to understand
Absolutely.
what's the future of the USMCA in this in 2026. Thank you so much for joining us here on Living in Mexico.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. We're going to go to a commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Don't go away. I'll be right back.
Muy bien, pues muchas gracias, Ana María.
Voy a ver qué está pasando con esta nota
Sí, a ver, lo voy a seguir ahorita y cualquier noticia que venga de Canadá y reacciones de Estados Unidos, te aviso también. Ya
Ok,
le dije a Mateo que posiblemente pronto lo busques para entrevista.
ok, perfecto. Estaría
Dale.
excelente. Cuídate,
Gracias, buen
bye.
fin de semana.
Bye.